So I grew up discussing DNA at the dinner table. While other families were talking about classmates or sports, my family was talking about molecular biology, RNA-binding proteins, the epigenome. See, I'm the daughter of two crazy scientists, two crazy proud scientists. In fact, both my parents had license plates on their cars to match their scientific expertise. Unfortunately, scientist was ultimately totaled, but the research continued. Anytime we kids wanted to taste a new chocolate bar, it was a practice in double-blind randomized controlled trials. You know, blinded, so we weren't biased by the wrapper. Point being, I grew up with science all around me. But as I got older, the science I knew and loved couldn't always help me, especially when it came to my own body. See, a biology textbook could tell me about how an average neuron worked, but it couldn't really tell me how to feel my best in my body. And that was especially difficult several years ago, when it felt like my body was falling apart. I was breaking out in rosacea and acne. My circulation was terrible. My nails were literally falling off, and I just felt exhausted and anxious. I didn't know why, and moreover, I didn't know how to change my condition. Doctors couldn't really understand how to help me either. When I told them that my period was erratic and irregular, they said my body would heal itself, which is a sentiment I can appreciate, but it's very frustrating when you're at a loss of what to do next. I wanted to be objective. I wanted to be evidence-based in how I approached my health. So I did a lot of research. I read a lot of studies, a lot of textbooks. But as you know, health science can be very confusing and sometimes even contradictory. What's more is that I felt like I was doing everything right. I was doing all the healthy things. Why was I feeling this way? But then I realized there was always one major problem. And this is actually a problem that affects each of us in this room. And that problem is that we are all unique. Our epigenome, our genes are unique. Our epigenome, the way that our genes are packaged, is unique. Our microbiome, the trillions of cells that live on and in us, it's all unique. And these unique factors greatly influence our physiology, from how we process foods to our preferences to exercises, our disease risks, our hormones, and so much more. In science, we would call this an N of one. We are a single subject in a one-of-a-kind clinical trial that is our life. So how can we expect to follow generic advice? How can any one resource or any one person have the answers for our body? And what's more is that I realized the textbooks, the papers, the experts, they didn't even have all the information. You see, I am the one every single day who is spending time in my body, who understands what it's like to exist in this physical vessel. I am the one who has access to what's going on with me subjectively. And in the world of health science, I often see this element of wellness, our subjective experience, completely missing from the conversation. And this is such a shame, because our health isn't just about getting the right blood sugar or blood pressure. It's also about, how do we feel in our bodies? Do we feel good? Do we feel healthy? And so I have come to realize that in order to get a complete picture of our health, we actually need both objective data, like our blood sugar and blood pressure, and we need to understand our subjective experience. And together, this can create a complete picture of our health. And so, all of this in mind, I wanted to create a new science-based approach to how I explored my own health, and that is what I call the science of self-care. The science of self-care includes objective data and subjective experience. It honors the fact that we are all unique, and the science of self-care is what took me from this inflamed human being to the happier, healthier person standing before you today. And now the science of self-care is also an online community and YouTube channel that I run. I talk all about self-care experimentation, I talk about health science, all in an effort to inspire people to embrace their own health with a little bit of playfulness and scientific curiosity. So today I hope to do the same. We're going to start off by talking about the theoretical foundation for the science of self-care, and then we're going to get to the fun stuff. We're going to talk practical tips and examples from my life to make this all a little more tangible. All right, I'm very excited. So I want to start off by demystifying science. because I know not all of you grew up with scientist parents, and as I was going through school, I realized that many of my classmates actually feared science as this intimidating, vague entity that felt distant and irrelevant. This is such a shame because science is for all of us. Science is a process by which we can learn about the world around us and even the world inside of us, our own biology, our own biochemistry. Science is really just the application of the scientific method, which is a method that helps us systematically test hypotheses or educated guesses to help us get a little bit closer to the truth. And as you may remember from school, some key steps of the scientific method are observation, hypothesis, experimentation, and analysis. Now before your eyes glaze over, I'm going to make this very practical and share an example from my own health journey. So back when I was feeling really, really bad, I made an interesting observation. I realized that actually, every morning when I woke up, I felt really, really good. And it wasn't until later in the morning that I started to feel bad, and it seemed to be like it was potentially connected to eating breakfast. So I made a hypothesis that my issues were related to the act of eating. I designed an experiment. For 2 weeks, I would be noting exactly how I felt when I woke up, while I was eating, afterwards, and I would eat breakfast at different moments of the morning and even into the afternoon, and I would keep everything else the same about my routine. So after 2 weeks of analyzing my notes and having these experiences, it became very clear to me that all my experiences were supporting this hypothesis that my issues were related to the act of eating. And this was a first clue for me, a first clue that maybe it had something to do with diet, digestion, or maybe even my blood sugar. I didn't have all the answers, but it was a first step. Now I want to pause really fast because maybe some of you are thinking, okay, you ate and felt bad. This is pretty obvious. Why do we need to formalize this? Well, it's true that this example is very straightforward, but when we are truly, in our deepest moments and we're desperate for answers, we're seeking relief and we're hurting the most, that is when we usually throw this methodology completely to the wind. That's when we decide to test 10 new things, 10 new supplements, 10 new exercises, instead of just trying one thing systematically. And the thing is, in science, it's really important that we adjust one variable at a time. This allows us to better understand how that single change is influencing or at least contributing to the outcomes that we observe. And if we don't follow this simple methodology and veer away from it, it's actually a lot more confusing, and that's when we get overwhelmed. So even though it seems tedious to follow these specific steps, it can make the process of self-learning a lot more efficient in the long run. Okay, great. So we're all on the same page, follow the scientific method. But there is a twist. See, the science of self-care is fundamentally different than a lot of other scientific explorations, because when we're doing experiments on ourselves, we are both the researcher and the subject. We are the investigator and the investigated. And this poses a potential problem. You see, when we are running research experiments on ourselves, how do we identify placebo effects? How do we know if something is actually working or it's working because we believe it's working? And just to review, the placebo effect is an ineffective or inactive treatment that produces a real therapeutic result. So this is especially relevant for self-care actions. How do we know if that one supplement we're taking is actually doing anything? And what's perhaps even more fascinating than our classic understanding of the placebo effect is that placebos are effective even when we're told that they're placebos. This is called an open-label placebo, or a placebo without deception. And one professor at Harvard has studied this extensively. He's looked at patients with irritable bowel syndrome. He's given them fake medicine, told them it's fake medicine, and still they've had better therapeutic results in the end compared to the control group that wasn't given any fake medicine. This has also been explored in a brilliant book by David Robson, The Expectation Effect. In this book, Robson details how in World War II, the nurses were running out of morphine, so they had to start treating soldiers with saline, salt water. They were getting a little creative. But remarkably, it turns out this salt water was still having an anesthetic effect for the injured soldiers. And follow-up research actually details how, in these situations, our brain can actually produce opioids. So we are essentially drugging ourselves. How cool is that? So I think this really shows how self-care is special. It is a special type of experience because just by doing something in the name of our health, the act of doing something for our wellness can actually set up our mind and our body to receive those actions very positively. So I think if we can't quite identify if something is a placebo, is that necessarily an issue? Because the point of self-care is really to be at our healthiest and to feel our best. And maybe perhaps we can even use placebos to our own advantage. That's just a little thought. I think the placebo effect is a very interesting example of how our subjective experience can directly influence our physiological health and different chemicals in our body. But it's really important that we don't solely rely on our subjective experience when analyzing our health. We actually need feedback from both objective data and subjective experience to get the complete picture. Because there are many things that are harmful to our body, like cancer-causing molecules, that don't reveal themselves to be harmful until several decades later. So that's why we need both of these things. And together, feedback from objective data and our subjective experience can actually help us build our most valuable health asset of all, our science-based intuition. Many researchers believe that intuition is our subconscious mind noticing patterns and making predictions. And feedback from both objective data and subjective experience can actually help us do this more quickly and easily. So let me give you an example. To better understand the different physiological experiences that I have in my body, I have experimented with a lot of self-monitoring devices. Like this one, which I'm wearing right now, which is a continuous glucose monitor. This really cool device measures my interstitial glucose levels, which is a marker for what my blood sugar would be. It's kind of a reflection of that. So at any given moment, I can check my phone and check my blood sugar. And this allows me to constantly compare my objective data, my blood sugar, with how I'm feeling subjectively in my body. And here's a little funny story. In the first week of using this device, I was on a walk with my sister, and I spontaneously burst out crying. I was feeling emotional, I was feeling frustrated, and I thought, let me check my blood sugar. And as it turns out, my blood sugar was very, very low. This was a very enlightening moment, and I think this is what experts call being hangry. So by using this device to measure my objective data and combine it with how I feel subjectively, I am able to build this science-based intuition. And after many months of using this, I won't even need to use it anymore because I will have already developed that understanding of what it feels like when my body is in low blood sugar and which meals are going to support my healthy blood sugar. So our science-based intuition is a really powerful tool that can take us through many different seasons of life because our body is always changing and it doesn't always help to stick to really rigid rules. And that's why this intuitive practice is so powerful. But we don't need any fancy devices to start to develop this science-based intuition. And now we're going to get to the really fun stuff, which are practical tips and experiments for you to play around with at home. So first, I just need to reiterate this one point. I said it earlier, but it's so important. It's really crucial that we only change one variable at a time to better understand the outcomes we're observing. So reminder, that means trying one new supplement at a time instead of 10. Second point, we can actually divide ourselves into different test groups by doing A/B testing on our body. Now, what does that mean? So there's only one of us, one unique human subject, but usually in a good scientific experiment, you want multiple test groups. You want to control the variable. We can do this by, for example, creating two groups with the left side of our body and the right side of our body. Now, this only really works for localized treatments. It's not going to work for something that's systemic, but this is my favorite way to use it. Whenever I test skincare, I always do one half of my face, my kind of baseline routine, and then I'll introduce one new product at a time on the other half. And in this way, by doing this for several days, it becomes very apparent to me whether this new product is helping my skin, hurting my skin, not doing anything at all. And this is actually how I discovered that zinc oxide diaper cream makes an amazing face mask for glowing skin. I kid you not. We can also create multiple test groups by dividing ourselves through time. So this means that in different weeks, we may enter different interventions. Now the problem with this is that we cannot account for variables through time. Sometimes you might get sick, sometimes your sleep might be disrupted. This is life, it's not a laboratory, but still, this will be more informative than having no experimental structure at all. So let me make this very clear with an example. I was very sick of not knowing whether my supplements were doing anything because, let's be honest, they are expensive. So I'm taking this magnesium glycinate because it's apparently helping my sleep, but I wanted to put that to the test. So I designed an ABX trial with the help of my mom and my sister and created a magnesium supplement and a look-alike tapioca starch placebo. And here my mom and my sister are helping me empty magnesium and stuff it with tapioca starch. And essentially this left me with 3 weeks of white pills. ABX means that one of these weeks is for sure going to be a magnesium, one is for sure going to be a tapioca starch placebo, and the third week is going to be an unknown. It's either going to be magnesium, tapioca, I don't know. And all of this will be completely randomized and unlabeled. So this is what I'm currently in possession of. 3 weeks of unlabeled pill boxes, and I'm actually on week 3. I have a little bit of an intuition about what I think each week was, but I will have to find out at the end of this week when the answers are revealed to me and I have to guess to my mom and my sister. So stay tuned for that. But the last tip I want to leave you with is that we have to be patient because scientific knowledge is gathered slowly over time. See, in science, we are systematically collecting little bits of new information that we add to an existing body of knowledge. And this is a slow and systematic process that helps us get slowly closer to the truth, veering a little left, veering a little right, always heading somewhere in a vague direction, never really getting there. And this means for us that we have a great body of knowledge as well, and when we're accosted with all of these new trends, contradictory information, diets, etc., we can have trust in the information in our knowledge store that we have already been building up around our body over our lifetime, and we can trust that that information is building to something bigger. And we can continue to collect new little bits of information with scientific curiosity, non-judgment, and neutral observation. So I want to circle back to my personal story now, back when I was feeling like this. So the breakfast issue, turned out it was a symptom of a bigger problem. My digestive lining was severely compromised. And by working with doctors, getting my gut health really under control, taking lots of vitamins and minerals and making sure that was all on point, by doing a structured elimination diet, and by doing many more little self-care experiments, I got to this place, currently feeling the best I have honestly felt in my entire life. And the exact protocol I follow is completely irrelevant to all of you because it's optimized for my body, and that's really the point of all of this. There is no one way to be healthy, and it's up to you to find your way. By viewing our whole health journey as just one long continuous experiment and collecting information about ourselves throughout, it can give us the confidence to prioritize our own findings over the findings of another person who's exploring their body. It can give us a sense of self-trust. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this talk, it's that you have the power to be the expert of your own body, and you are capable of using scientific principles for personal discovery and self-care. So even if you didn't have crazy scientist parents like I did, I can assure you that you still have a self-care scientist within you. Thank you so much.